Welcome everybody to the offseason here in the Miami Marlins franchise here on MLB The Show 23. In the last episode, we concluded season number 4 in heartbreaking fashion, losing Game 7 of the NLCS to the Phillies by the final score of 8-6, leading the Phillies going to the World Series. As for us, our season is over, and it's back to the drawing board as we prepare ourselves for another offseason, and hopefully we can bring ourselves over the hump as a true World Series contender. In the NLCS, the home team won every game until Game 7. Both teams hit the ball really well, but the difference was that the Phillies bullpen was phenomenal. Zach Wheeler, who's been great throughout the playoffs, did not have a good start, but then the bullpen comes in and they absolutely shut the door. Tarek Skubal does not have a good performance, and a strong game for the offense is not enough to overcome our pitching woes. So the Phillies get the job done. They'll play against the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. The Phillies only won 84 games this year, and they have been without arguably their best player, Juan Soto, since the All-Star break with a knee injury. Yet they've made it all the way here, and they're going to be facing off against the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. We would have obviously played against them had we won. And the Rays have a very interesting squad. They still have some familiar faces like Randy Arozarena and well-known child respecter Wander Franco. Shane McClanahan leads a talented staff, and they've acquired some other good bats, including the big power-hitting third baseman, Munetaka Murakami. The Rays are coming off a sweep against the Guardians, although all 4 games were decided by just 1 run, interestingly enough. So we'll simulate the 2026 World Series as the Rays get off to a strong start, but the Phillies win Game 2. That's Tampa's first playoff home loss. Now the Phillies looking to respond here at Citizens Bank Park, and they do not do that. The Phillies had not lost at home themselves in the playoffs until here, and that brings us into a pivotal Game 5 with the 2 aces, Buehler and McClanahan, and the Rays get the job done. So Tampa Bay takes 2 on the road. Now they just need 1 at home, and they finish them off in Game 6. The Tampa Bay Rays are World Series champions, and they do it in walk-off fashion. I was able to do the math based on the box score. It was a walk-off single from Matt Thaiss to win the game for the Rays to win their first World Series in team history as they get revenge for the 2008 World Series. Not that anybody in either organization played much of the part in 2008. We're nearly 20 years into the future, but that is besides the point. The playoff MVPs ended up going to Trey Turner in the National League. Hoskins and Harper had better numbers, and they were both better against us than Trey Turner. I feel like it should have been one of them, especially Harper. And then in the AL, it is postseason hero Randy Arozarena, while Alfredo Herrera wins the World Series MVP. Alfredo Herrera was a subscriber-made custom player, and he just won the World Series MVP. Pretty cool. So before we get into the offseason, I've gotten some suggestions about possibly doing playoff studs and duds, and I think that's a good idea, so we're going to do that here real quick. I'm going to make the reward and punishment system a little bit different, though, and a little bit less because, well, there's obviously a lot less playoff games than the regular season games. So the winner will get +2 to their ratings and potential, loser will get -2 to both, and then second and third place will get +1. Since we're in the offseason, it's kind of too late to have a vote, so I'm going to decide them all here, but hopefully next time we're in the playoffs, I'll remember to have a vote. So remember, these are players who sort of played above their expectations. Bo Bichette playing really well, for example, is not playing above his expectations. He's a superstar. We expect him to look like a star, and he did. Jesus Sanchez is not a superstar. However, he elevated his game in the postseason, especially against the Phillies. Sanchez led the team in pretty much every major offensive statistic. He led the team in WAR amongst all players. He was our third-place finisher for stud of the year in the regular season. He got a +1 boost then, and he's going to get an additional +2 thanks to his great performance in the playoffs, and his potential goes up to an 89. Nick Fortes has been a big winner of the stud and dud of the year system. Fortes was able to go up by 8 in his ratings and potential through the first 3 seasons, but this year he went down by 3 after being our dud of the year. He picked it up in the playoffs. He played really well, and he's going to make up one of the 3 rating points that he lost back up. So he's now an 83 overall, and he's back at B potential. Our third place finisher for the stud of the year will be Camilla Duvall. out of the bullpen. I thought he was just really good and really consistent, and there wasn't really anybody else who I thought deserved it more than him because he's been so good. He was second in pitching WAR, only behind Sandy Alcantara. I don't know how Sandy has .4 and Edward Cabrera only has .1. I guess that goes to show you that WAR can be a flawed stat sometimes, and it's not the only thing that we should go off of. Duvall's going to go up by 1. He is now a 90 overall. He is filthy, and I'm happy we extended him early when we did. So now it is time for the postseason duds of the year, the guys who had expectations and did not live up to them. And there were two very clear candidates for me, Luis Arraez and Tarik Skubal. Both guys were very disappointing. Skubal had a negative .4 WAR, which amongst all pitchers was really bad. Luis Arraez had a negative .4 WAR himself, second worst amongst all position players who played in the playoffs, while Skubal had the third worst WAR amongst all pitchers who played in the playoffs. So, long story short, both players were really not good. I didn't know who to pick, so the ultimate tiebreaker, who played at their best when the lights shined the brightest? Luis Arraez had 3 hits in Game 7, while Tarik Skubal allowed 5 runs. And so that's going to be enough for Tarik Skubal to be our postseason dud of the year. He started in 3 games. He really wasn't all that good in any of them. And so Skubal's potential and rating will go down by 2. He's now only an 88 with B potential. I think it's fair to say he definitely lost himself some money for his next contract with this postseason run. And his next contract is this offseason. He is a free agent, and he choked at the worst time for his bank account. Luis Arraez hit 250, and I get it, surface value. That doesn't look horrible, but the other numbers are not good. He only drew 2 walks. He only had 1 extra base hit. So even though he hit for decent average, which is already below his standards, the rest of his numbers are really not good, and he already plays subpar defense to begin with. This is somebody at the top of the order who needs to consistently get on base, and he really didn't do that, and he didn't provide any extra base power whatsoever. So he will go down by 1. He might have lost himself a little bit of money on his next contract as well, which, again, is this offseason, being that he is a free agent. But I don't think it'll be as big of a deal as Tarik Skubal because he's no longer in the 90s and he doesn't have A potential. I thought about our last spot for a while, and I'm going to give it to Sandy Alcantara. He started in 4 games, and he was not great. He did pitch better as the playoffs went along, and I did feel a little bit bad giving him this spot because in the 4 games that he pitched, we won all 4 of them. But it was not because of Sandy Alcantara pitching well. He led us in pitching WAR, and we won every time he pitched, but that doesn't mean he pitched well. And if this was our 3rd or 4th starter, I wouldn't really bat an eye. But for Sandy Alcantara, who's expected to pitch at an ace level, he didn't do that. So he's going to go down by 1. He is now the same rating as Edward Cabrera. And with Cabrera's play over the last couple of years, I think he has passed Sandy as the ace on the staff. I did think about Woody Landry and Brian De La Cruz as well for dud of the year. But both guys did play really well down the stretch. Woody had some big hits in Games 6 and 7, including the home run to basically win us Game 6. And then Brian De La Cruz played well down the stretch too. He had the 3-run homer in Game 7. So I think the fact that both of those guys played really well down the stretch was enough for them not to be duds of the year. So let's get the offseason started now. We will start with retirements. We have nobody in our organization who will be calling it a career. There are some other notable names. Jacob Stallings, former Marlin. Jacob Miller, former Marlins prospect, is going to retire after a head injury. That really sucks. Tommy Pham is going to retire. Eric Hosmer, Austin Nola. And then in free agency, this is where the longer list is. Matt Carpenter, Nelson Cruz at age 46. Yes, he is actually 46. Nathan Eovaldi, Marco Gonzalez, Nico Goodrum, Sonny Gray, Robbie Grossman, former Marlin Yuli Gurriel, Billy Hamilton, Kyle Hendricks, Marcelo Iglesias, Kenley Jansen, Joe Kelly, Clayton Kershaw retires, probably a Hall of Famer, Craig Kimbrell, and then even some more relievers like Kittredge and Corey Knebel, JD Martinez, Miles Michaelis, David Peralta, James Paxton, and former Marlin Joey Wendell, Westchester, PA's finest, and then there's Kirby Yates at the bottom. We only had 1 Hall of Famer in this class. Unsurprisingly, it's Clayton Kershaw, who's going to go in as a Ranger, even though he was only there for 1 year. So now that'll bring us into the offseason, and we've got some big decisions to make. As a small market team, it's hard for us to keep all the talent we have here, and a large amount of our core will be free agents either this offseason or next offseason. Here's the list of guys we have to pay this year. In terms of pitchers, Tarek Skubal in the rotation. And then relievers, we've got Domingo Germán, AJ Puk, Dylan Tate, and Reynaldo Lopez. As for the position players, there's more. Basically our whole infield. Luis Arraez, Yandy Diaz, Gavin Lux, and this doesn't even account for the player options that we have on the roster as well. Jordan Hicks, who missed basically the entire year, has a player option for $5.5 million. And then the big one, Bo Bichette has a player option for $24 million. After the season that he had, I am fully expecting him to decline. I think he can make a lot more money in the open market, and we're going to have to make a decision on Bo Bichette if we want to give him a long-term deal or let him walk. I thought Bo Bichette was really good, and I would like to pay him. But here's the problem. We already have $127 million tied up. That does include the 2 player options, but even if both players say no, that's going to be like $100 million. While we've been able to extend certain players like Woody Landry and Edward Cabrera early, we've got a long list of free agents next year. Sandy Alcantara, Devin Williams, Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez, Luis Robert, and Jazz Chisholm is going to be a free agent the following season, as will Nick Fortes. That's a lot of guys we got to pay within the next couple of years, and realistically, we can't pay everybody. We're going to have to let some guys go. So let's start with the players that we have here, and we'll begin with the pitchers, opening up with Tarek Skubal, who we acquired at the trade deadline from the Detroit Tigers. After we acquired him, he really did not pitch all that well, and in the playoffs, he was really bad. He wants $16 million, which is less than what he had wanted after we had traded for him. But based on what we've seen from him, I don't think he's going to be worth that. I like the guys that we have in the farm system. I think we can get someone who's cheaper and better. As for our relievers, we are going to decline Dylan Tate's team option for $6.2 million. I think he's really good, but I think we can get relievers of his level for less money. And see, he wants significantly less, so for now we're going to offer him a 2-year deal for $8 million. Reynaldo Lopez was really good this past season with an ERA at 2, quietly one of the best players really on the entire roster, and he's going to ask for similar money. I think he's absolutely worth it. I really want to have him back in the bullpen because he is really, really good. The AJ Puk experience over the last 4 seasons has certainly been an experience, but the last 2 years he's been really good, and he wants a big pay raise as a result. I think Puk is a good player, and he's got some good years left, but for $8 million, I feel like it's too much. I think we can get someone better for cheaper, so I think we're going to let him walk. And then Domingo Germán, I don't really see a reason to bring him back. We have Max Meyer, who can provide us the same services, but is better. Let's look at the position players now. We will start off with Gavin Lux, who we acquired at the Season 2 trade deadline from the Dodgers. And as Season 2 went along, this looked like a really good acquisition. I really thought he'd be our shortstop of the future. Over the last 2 years, he's missed a lot of games, though, due to injury. This year, he didn't even play well, and he wants a lot of money. I think it would be in our best interest to let him walk. He's played well when we've had him, other than this year, but he has a hard time staying on the field, and this year he wasn't all that good. Luis Arraez is on a team option for next year, and he had a fine season. He wasn't as good as he was last year, and obviously in the playoffs he was not good. The whole point of the team option, though, was to use it dependent on Khalil Watson's development, and obviously he really did not develop much this year. If anything, he took a step backwards. We're still going to decline the option, however, for Arraez. Now, unfortunately, he wants more money than the 8-point whatever team option he had. So we're not going to offer him now. We're going to sort of see how the open market plays out, and I'm going to pay attention to who else is there at second base. Maybe we go back to Arraez. Maybe we go in a different direction. Yandy Diaz had a good season. We've traded for him 2 years in a row now. Last year we didn't pay him, and we regretted it. I think we're going to do the same thing with him that we're going to do with Luis Arraez. We're not going to offer him now. I don't want to lock into anything, but we're going to pay attention to him once we get into the open market. So for now, we're only offering 2 players. Again, I really want to be smart and strategic with how we use our money. We have 3 open vacancies on the staff. I think Skip Shoemaker's done a great job as the manager. There's no reason to get a new one, so we're going to look to bring him back for 2 more years. I like Jeremy O'Brien to potentially be our new hitting coach. +3 clutch is a big one for me because this team is not clutch at all, and +3 power is pretty nice too. We're going to look at Eric Lane to be the new farm director. I think the hardest skill to develop in this game is contact, and for me, that's by far the most important amongst young minor leaguers. If you can't hit for good contact, I don't want you on my roster, period. So I think he's going to be a good fit for what you were looking for. Let's simulate up to free agency now. We'll start with the results of the staff. Skip Shoemaker and Jeremy O'Brien accept. However, Eric Lean, who we wanted as our farm director, instead will be the hitting coach of the Yankees. So we're going to look at Luis Diaz instead. He was really the only good option who had at least +2 contacts, so that made my choice pretty easy. Let's see what happens with the player options, and that starts with Bo Bichette, who surprisingly is going to accept his player option, meaning that Bo Bichette will be back on the Marlins for this upcoming season. This is a major surprise, in my opinion. I really thought Bo Bichette could have gotten more money on the open market with a long-term deal, but he's going to stick around and run it back. I didn't really want to have to make a tough decision on what we're going to do with Bo's contract, so I'm happy that he's making it easy for us, and I'm really excited to have him back on the roster because he was arguably our most consistent position player last year. And now he joins the list of players who we have to pay next year, which already is a long list as is. Jordan Hicks also accepts his player option, so he'll be back as well. Having Bo and Hicks back, I think it's going to be a big deal. I'm surprised both of them accepted. I thought Hicks probably would. I definitely did not think Bo would. So now that brings us into free agency. And again, with all the guys we have to pay next year, we have to be smart with how we utilize our money. It's not like we're the Yankees or the Mets and have unlimited money to spend in free agency. We're going to do the dirty work of the offseason first. That starts with selecting the 40-man roster. We will be adding a couple of guys. The first one is infielder Ariel Amador, who I thought had a pretty good season in the minors with Khalil Watson's stock going down. I think he could be a long-term starter for us. Edgar Quero, we got him at the trade deadline from the Dodgers. He's going to be added as well. We don't have a very long list here for arbitration. Brian De La Cruz, Nick Fortes, and Jesus Sanchez really headline the list. There aren't a whole lot of other key players here, so we're going to offer those 3 guys, obviously. We're also going to offer Rob Refsnyder while letting Jorge Alcala, Yusei Kikuchi, and Braxton Garrett go. Now for tendering contracts, this is 80% of the organization, pretty much all of our minor leaguers and our young big leaguers. There aren't any major league players here who I'm going to give a long-term extension to because, quite frankly, no one here really deserves it at this stage of their career. I would love to pay a guy like Yuri Perez or Jacob Berry long-term, but neither of those guys have played at a high enough level for me to justify that. All right, it's time for free agency. We've got $112 million currently tied up. That does not include our pending free agent offers. That does not include arbitration. That does not include tendering contracts. So that number is going to go up. It's a pretty talented free agency class. Maybe not the elite star power that we've had over the last couple of years, but there are some good players headlined by Andres Jimenez, Munetaka Murakami, Alejandro Kirk, and a pretty solid group of pitchers. As it stands now, we have 2 offers out on the table for Dylan Tate and Reynaldo Lopez, and I think we definitely are going to look to add pitching. We definitely have young arms and young position players who can contribute in the majors next year. Isaac Stu is somebody who I definitely think has a shot to contribute. He can only play first base, though. Him and Woody Landry obviously both can't play first. So we're going to change Landry's secondary position from catcher to third base. He has a really good arm, and him playing catcher was always unorthodox to begin with, considering he throws left-handed. I definitely want to add a starting pitcher with Tarek Skubal, for now gone, and I wouldn't mind somebody who is potentially cheaper than Skubal, maybe even 2 guys here in the low 80s. So after searching here, not just at the starters, but also the relievers, I think Jeffrey Springs would be a good addition. We need somebody who's a lefty in the starting rotation, and I think Springs is pretty good. He comes from the Rays, who obviously just won the World Series. I think he's asking for a little too much money, though. We're going to offer him 1 year for $11.5 million. I want to look at the relievers next, and I think Paul Sewald would be a really good fit for what we're looking for. Sewald has been with the Mariners and the Twins over the last couple of years, and this past season he was great. He nearly had a full point of WAR despite only throwing 24 innings. I think in an extended role here, he could be really good. 1 year, $7.5 million. We're going to take Dylan Tate's offer off the list for now since we're looking to add Paul Sewald. Let's look at the position players now, and there are definitely a few guys here who catch my eye. The name who pops out to me the most is Randy Arozarena from the Tampa Bay Rays. He's coming off a career year. He just won the World Series with Tampa, won the playoff MVP, and he's not asking for that much money. The problem is we do not need outfield at all. Even if we make Jazz Chisholm a full-time infielder again, we still have a lot of guys in the outfield. Now, albeit, said outfielders are all free agents after next year, so that's an easy argument to make as well. But I think it would make more sense to look at the infield because I think that's where we have holes with Yandy Diaz, Gavin Lux, and Luis Arraez currently not on the roster. I think the most talent is here at second base. That, of course, includes Luis Arraez. But I think we're going to offer Ha-Seong Kim for right now. I think Kim certainly is not as good of a player offensively as Luis Arraez. I also looked at Jonathan India, but he's a little bit too expensive. I think Ha-Seong Kim really gives us a good, well-rounded player who can play a bunch of different positions. He hits for decent enough average, decent enough pop. He plays really strong defense, and again, he can play just about anywhere on the infield. And you just sort of know what you're going to get with him. I'm going to offer him a one-year deal for $8.8 million. He wants less money than Luis Arraez, and he's better than Luis Arraez, in my opinion. So let's now simulate. These are going to be the 4 offers we have here for the start of free agency. I'm going to very closely monitor Randy Rosarena's contract, though, because I think that could be really good value. So Ahmed Rosario quickly signs with the Red Sox. Minataka Murakami to the Brewers. That's a big signing, and I think that's a really fair price. Less than $20 a year for a big-time power bat. Ha-Seong Kim does sign with the Marlins, so he will now be our most likely everyday second baseman. He does not give us the offense that Luis Arraez does, but I think he's just an all-around better player. Garrett Crochet signs with the Mariners, and now it's time to have the Luis Arraez talk. I've really enjoyed having him over the last 4 years, but seeing how this playoff has gone and really seeing him not be the same player in the regular season, only hitting .284, I think it would be in our best interest to move on. Alex Vesia signs with the Astros. Andres Jimenez signs for $280 million with the Angels. They've got themselves a nice squad. Don't forget, the Angels made the World Series just 2 years ago. They've been willing to spend a lot of money on guys like Logan Webb and now Andres Jimenez. So we're getting closer to the end of November. Paul Sewell has accepted his deal. He is here, but Jeffrey Springs and Reynaldo Lopez have not yet. There are still new offers on Randy Arozarena, and I'm still very tempted. But for now, I'm still going to hold off because I just don't really see a spot for him. I'm not going to sign guys just to sign guys. Look at the Phillies. They acquire Alejandro Kirk. 6 years, $200 million. I know that looks like a lot of money, but Kirk has 3 consecutive seasons of at least 7 WAR. That is ridiculous. JC Realmuto is one of the best catchers in baseball. There aren't many guys who would be an upgrade, but Alejandro Kirk is absolutely one of them. Realmuto is a free agent. He's likely out the door. Tyler Stevenson signs with the Giants. Considering what Alejandro Kirk got, this is a bargain. Stevenson's really not that much worse of a player. The Reds have been trying to trade him for a while. I don't know why. He hit .320 with 30 homers. And then Dalton Varsho signs with the Pirates. So now we are in the month of December. Pretty much all of our minor leaguers are under contract, which is great because that means we can trade them if we would like. And as it stands now, we are currently paying guys $148 million. Now we still have our guys on arbitration. And Jeffrey Springs still has not signed yet. We did get Reynaldo Lopez, though. Randy Arozarena did sign the cheap deal with the Rays. There's a part of me that wishes I was willing to give him the money because that's absurd value, but we just don't need him. I wanted to take a look at potential lefty arms who we could trade for rather than paying Jeffrey Springs, but I really didn't find anyone I was tempted by. So we're going to bite the bullet and give Springs more money because I think he'd be a really good fit. Tarek Skubal signs with the Guardians, so he will be leaving us, returning to the AL Central, joining one of the better teams in baseball, and he'll be joined by Freddie Peralta. Cleveland will lose Tristan McKenzie, but signing these 2 guys for probably less money than McKenzie's going to get is really good. So now that'll bring us to the draft lottery. We had the 27th pick. We obviously are not going to have a lottery pick, and there really was not much movement. The Nationals moved up from 4 to 1, and the Royals moved down from 1 to 4. That's it. Pretty boring draft lottery. So now we will simulate up to the Rule 5 draft as Jose Suarez signs with the Padres. That's a pretty big deal. He was a guy I looked at, but I just think he wanted too much money. And now it's time for the Rule 5 draft. We obviously have one of the final picks in the first round, being that, our team is really good. I looked at the possible players we could pick. There was nobody I wanted, so we're going to skip our selection. That now brings us to sort of the dead period of the offseason from like the middle of December into February. All the big-time free agents are gone. There isn't really anything new for us to do. We can certainly look at guys on the trade market, but other than that, there isn't really any noteworthy news to go over. I did some exploring on the trade market. I've seen some comments suggest that we trade a guy like Sandy Alcantara, and I think it's an interesting idea because he's on the last year of his contract. I'm not going to do it for now, but we're certainly going to keep a close eye on how he pitches, because if he pitches like he did this year, he's not going to be worth the money that he's asking for. The Phillies signed David Bednar because, of course, they do. One of their only weaknesses was closer. Now it's a strength. They do lose JT Realmuto, who signs with the Rangers. I'm a little bit perplexed by that because they just extended Jonah Heim. The Twins signed Brady Sr. The Giants signed Matt Chapman. I feel like Matt Chapman always ends up on the Giants in my series. I don't know why. Ryan Mountcastle, the Astros, I like that deal. And then Trevor Rogers to the Orioles, the former Marlin. Rogers, unironically, is like the exact type of pitcher that we need. And since we've traded him for Luis Robert, Rogers has honestly been better. Now, I don't know if we would have gotten him to do that here, so I don't regret the trade. But it is worth noting that he has been a better player since the trade compared to Luis Robert. Ian Anderson signs with the Nationals, and then Tristan McKenzie will join Trevor Rogers in Baltimore. The Orioles have a nasty 1-2 punch at the top of their rotation. Brendan Rodgers traded to the Twins for Jordan Balazovic and Randall Snell. Garrett Whitlock signs with the Guardians. They have 20,000 good starting pitchers. They already have Kodai Senga as well, and they've already got Daniel Espino. They've already got multiple other good players there. Kyle Wright to the Dodgers is a big deal. It's nice that he's leaving Atlanta, but I don't like that he's joining another National League contender. It is worth noting that the Braves have done nothing this offseason, which is definitely a positive. So here at the beginning of February, some of the top players in free agency are some of our former guys, Lux and Arise. Clearly, a lot of teams have the same concerns that we do. Jeffrey Springs, by the way, is gone. He did end up signing with us, so he is now on the team. Pretty much everybody in free agency is signed. That includes Gavin Lux, Luis Arise, Yandy Diaz, Dylan Tate. They are all on new teams. So now let's talk about the trade market. Usually in the month of February, this is where I am my most active looking for trades, because everybody, not just on our team, but around the league, is under contract. And I think this is the best opportunity for us to look at the trade market. I would like to go after another bat. We lost 3 infielders and we only got 1 new one. I think Alec Boehm in Colorado would be a good fit. Boehm hits for good contact. He's only a career 5 WAR player, so he's not like some big loss for the Rockies. They are offering us a lot here, which is odd because I had put him in the trade finder off camera 5 minutes prior, and the offer that I got, as you'll see, was significantly less. So I don't know what changed within the span of 5 minutes, but okay. The other guy who I think would make a lot of sense is Royce Lewis in Minnesota. They have a very crowded middle infield with Carlos Correa. They just traded for Brendan Rodgers, Edouard Julien, Brooks Lee, Austin Martin, Michael Garcia, Jimmy Schaefer. There's a lot of guys there. Royce Lewis, like Boehm, hits lefties well. I don't think he's as good of an offensive player that Alec Boehm is, but he provides more otherwise. He's a better defensive player, he's faster, and he can play literally every position in the book. I think he'd be a good fit for what we want, and again, we wouldn't have to give up a king's ransom. Of the two, I think I would ultimately prefer Alec Boehm, and we will agree to a deal here with the Rockies. We're going to be acquiring Boehm, who I think is going to be a really good fit for what we're looking for. He's Yandy Diaz, but on steroids, and his contact will not make us miss Luis Arise too badly, hopefully. We're also going to get Matthew Lugo as well. He's a 25-year-old shortstop prospect in exchange for Johnny Lundy, who's a solid starting pitching prospect. He did have a down season, though. And then Charles Harris, who's a solid B potential outfielder. Both Lundy and Harris were part of our second draft class. And I think this is a fair deal for both sides. The Rockies have Ryan McMahon, who's really good. They don't need Alec Boehm, whereas I think he's a really good fit for our roster. I think that's going to be the only trade we make for now. I think that Isaac Stu is a guy who very well could contribute at the big league level. He's going to join the 40-man along with a number of other young guys who I think could contribute. Andres Vina, our first-round pick last year, we drafted him because he was MLB ready. Tyrell Berry, he's going to potentially compete for that 5th starter spot. Robbie Jones will as well. He was already on the 40-man roster. And from there, I think we've gone through just about everything with our roster. I think we had a good offseason adding Ha-Seong Kim, Jeffrey Springs, Alec Boehm, and Paul Sewald. We did lose quite a few former Marlins. We talked about Tarek Skubal, but what about the others? Dylan Tate signs in St. Louis. Domingo Germán goes to the Chicago White Sox. Luis Arise signs a 3-year deal with the Cubs. They're one of the best teams in the National League, so Luis Arise is now on a team who is a direct competitor of us. Gavin Lux teams up with Dylan Tate. He signs a big 5-year deal in St. Louis. And then Yandy Diaz signs with the Pirates. Are we going to trade for Yandy Diaz again at the trade deadline? I don't know. Hopefully Alec Bohm makes it to where we don't need to. So that'll bring us into spring training now. Normally this is where I would show the international free agents. However, I'm going to save those for the next episode. We've got some tough decisions long-term to make financially. I think we were smart this offseason in terms of acquiring talent, while also being mindful that we have a lot of guys who we have to pay next year and beyond. And we're going to be able to make those decisions based on how these players are going to perform this year. Hopefully the additions we made this offseason will be enough to propel us to being a true World Series contender. Next episode, we're going to kick off the regular season. It should be a lot of fun. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Peace out.